Hi, everyone. Welcome to another amazing topic of conversation. First, I want to thank my sponsors, the Health Channel. So please sign up for their newsletter with anything regarding your health, sign up, and Alexa's Workspaces. If you want just an office for a month, an hour, or even a year, or just a place to have a meeting, Alexa's Workspaces. So thank you. Ethan, welcome.
It's always great to have a chat with you.
No, it's a pleasure having a conversation with you. The next generation of politicians.
It has a bad rap. Some people might like it, some people might not. But
I
hopefully
know,
this
and
next
you're gonna
generation will be better
enlighten
than this one.
me. You're going to definitely enlighten me with everything. So I know that you're a senior, you're graduating, and you're applying to a lot of schools to go into international politics and political science.
Yes.
Why?
Well, why is actually a question that a lot of kids my age are now asking. And among my peers, a lot of kids are very interested in politics, and that's honestly not really a trend that we've seen too frequently. And in my personal experience, at least in my capacity with the youth and in my experience, with friends and understanding how kind of my friends think, from what I understand, is a large majority of the youth in America, and what the statistics show are between 18 and 24, a large majority of the youth in America do not trust the government, or at least are dissatisfied with how the political system in the United States is working. And in the true spirit of democracy, at least for my generation, we're kind of going to length to try to change that dissatisfied outlook that we have on our political system. So why I'm trying to go into politics is because I feel like our nation's kind of taking a twist, right? We went from major scholars that were in politics, people that really had a very, very just enlightened outlook of politics and of our country and of where our country can be in 100 years, to kind of who looks the best in the public perception, right? Public perception has just taken its toll in politics, as opposed to doing what's best for the country and what's best for whatever studies that you study in. We've kind of taken a turn and turned politics into a reality TV show. And it's something that at least people in my generation are seeing loud and clear. And it's why, in my opinion, a lot of kids don't really want to go to the election booths and vote for their candidates, because they don't know who their candidates are. This is, I think, in my opinion, one of the first times in our nation's history where people do not know who to vote for.
Do you think that we're lowering the bar when we're electing now the new leaders?
Substantially. We really, really are lowering the bars. And I would like to say that it's happening slowly, but it's not. I mean, we've seen a shift in our country in the span of 20 years that we probably would not have expected, right? We've went from scholarly people that discuss issues and are surrounded by smart people, to kind of a fiasco that's going on in Washington, D.C., and even here at home in Florida and in other states that we kind of see. And it's definitely taking a toll on how the future generation of Americans see politicians. We have so much stuff that's going on, to the point where CNN and Fox News and all these big news outlets that are supposed to report news are reporting the same things that TMZ is reporting, because Washington, D.C. has become so much of Hollywood that it's become more of entertainment than it is of news.
But okay, and let's leave the fact that now we have a lot of information out there. And there's the facts, and there's social media, and there's the fake news, right? So now there's a whole confusion and mismatch. But for example, I don't understand why people continue, and I'm not talking about any political views, but I don't understand why nothing was done, for example, with Fox News when they were found liable. They literally had to pay millions and millions of dollars for saying a lie. And nothing happened. So how do you overcome all that?
Well, it's because we've gotten to the point in this country where a truth and a lie has it developed a bridge. A popular lie essentially becomes a truth in this country, right? As long as enough people support a lie, the fact that it's a lie can easily be overlooked. And it's something that we see in our news today that's just kind of taken over the news channels that we watch. I mean, we had a circumstance when we talk about the war in Israel where the Al-Shifa hospital, when we had a bombing there, you had a lot of news outlets that did not hesitate to report that Israel destroyed a Palestinian hospital. And then all of a sudden, when more information came in, where was everybody? Where were the lawsuits for being held liable and being held defamatory against the IDF? Where's the accountability? And it's the same thing that goes on the other aisle. Fox News has repeatedly spewed misinformation and just lies, and there is no accountability. And that's the issue that we're facing in this country. And then we ask the future generations, we ask my friends, we ask my generation to stay informed on topics that it seems even the current generation can't stay informed on. So the problem is we need to find that fine line between a truth and a lie, and between entertainment and news. And it seems that nowadays it's been so bridged together that the truth and the lies are blending in, and news and entertainment are becoming the same thing.
No, you're totally right. And I'm so glad that people like you want to make a difference. So this year, it's your first time voting.
Yes, 2024 will be my first time voting, and I'm really excited. Yes.
So tell me a little bit of what you stand for. And I'm not saying whether you're a Republican, you're a Democrat. No, just a little bit about what are the issues that you would like to see some change in. What is your wish list?
So, well, for me personally, I mean, we got to just kind of take a look at my background, because that's honestly what voting's about. It's about everybody with their special interests, with their backgrounds, with their experiences. One side of my family comes from Israel. The other side of my family comes from Latvia. I'm a first generation American. I'm the first person in my family to be born in the United States. And with that kind of comes a heavy weight that stays on my shoulder. I have to come to this nation and support this nation, love the nation that I was born in, while also supporting Israel and supporting Latvia. And that's where kind of international politics really takes its toll, and especially in the voting booths. For me, it seems that the kind of two sides that we're voting on are very, very different, in the sense that one of them are kind of taking a shift and kind of advocating for isolationism, while the other one is kind of sitting there and saying, well, let's get involved. And oftentimes, especially when you're kind of begging for the life of your family, in the sense of, a war in Israel and a potential war in Europe, really politics kind of leaves my mind.
A literally war in Europe.
Right. But a potential even, more grandeur war in Europe, a larger war in Europe. So sometimes politics is thrown out the window in that sense. And you ask yourself, okay, there's who I agree with and who I believe will kind of just do the best for the country. And that's something that I've kind of been considering, especially when we consider, the two main candidates that we're suspecting for 2024. There's what I believe what my domestic beliefs are and what my moral beliefs are. And then there's also just kind of the raw, what do I think can happen after 2024, depending on who we elect.
Those are a lot of things that can change.
Right.
And that is where we were talking before, accountability.
For sure. So and as is politics most times.
That I don't understand.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of flip-flopping that happens in politics, and that's just kind of how politics works. And it plays in a disadvantageous side, and it also plays to a better side. There are times where at least politicians are playing to the masses, and there are times where they kind of close the doors and say, here's what we have to do necessarily. I know that I advocated for this, but at a time like this, we need to do the right thing or something else.
But one thing that you say is the flip-flop. One thing that I don't call it flip-flop, I call it negotiations. Flip-flop is literally changing. Right. Completely changing your views, and that is not what you stand for.
For
And
sure.
that was the biggest and the hardest thing to do, because I learned that it's not about what you want, but it's about what you can do for your country. Like President Kennedy used to say, it's not what your country can do for you, it's what you can do for your country. And
Right.
that
And
is
that's one
totally
big aspect.
eliminated.
Right. That's one big aspect, that, the idea that you as a politician are a servant of the people. And that's something that lately we've kind of forgotten. It's just been more of I'm not the servant to the American people, I'm the servant to the people that voted for me. But those aren't your constituents. Maybe you were elected by 50% of the country or 60% of the country, but you still have 40% of the country that you are representing. So yeah, 100%. I mean, it's not only about flip-flopping, it is about negotiation, and it is about kind of defining where your red line is, and kind of when you can step aside and say, hey, I might not agree with this issue, but is it at the benefit of all 100% of Americans that I represent, or is it only for the benefit of the 60% of Americans that got me elected?
Well, let me ask you a little bit more concrete issues.
Sure.
Guns.
Go for it.
Where do you stand with guns? Florida has now a permitless carry. And murders have increased. I don't know how, by what percentage, but it has really spiked.
Right.
Do you believe that there should be a real hold and a ban on guns?
Sure. So before I hop into that, just really quickly, we need to understand, at least politically speaking, that there is a middle ground to a debate like this, and there is a middle ground to a topic like this. What we honestly see that's really polarizing nowadays is that people believe that they're either on the left and believe that they should ban guns, or they're on the right and believe that guns should be free. Everybody should have a gun. I'm honestly right middle, in the sense that I believe that every person does have a right to bear arms. They have a right to defend themselves. They have honestly, in my opinion, a responsibility to their family to make sure that their family is safe. But on the other hand, I really don't see not monitoring and not observing who has these guns as responsible, just kind of government. I mean, government is there for a reason, right? The obligation and the responsibility of government should not be making sure that guns aren't in the hands of the people. It should be making sure that guns aren't in the hands of the wrong people. And we talk about crime. There are things called red flag laws. We know sometimes before a homicide happens or before a shooting happens, who is more likely to commit these shootings. There are family members that are concerned with what their brothers are doing or their father is doing, because they either have a history of violence or they have a history of hatred. And so a red flag law that would allow people to report their family members and bring it in front of a judge would give us an opportunity to prevent a gun from going into the wrong person's hand. So there is a middle ground to this issue.
Or the AK-47. Those are military grade arms that should not be in the hands of anyone except the military.
Right. Right. I mean, there are assault weapons, and there's the idea of an assault weapon ban. But then we need to also beg the question: do we want to really play fair in a fight like this? Can criminals and can bad people get access to these assault rifles that we're so worried about? I mean, we still have the issue of a very, very open border in the South, and it's an issue that's kind of really been plaguing our country since, well, the beginning of 2020. We have a very open border, and with that comes a slew and an influx of weapons that we aren't monitoring and we can't control. So if somebody's going to come to my house with an AK-47, I either have to be really, really good at fighting back with my handgun, or I need to level the playing field and be able to fight back.
Okay, so open borders. You are the first generation here. You talk to me about what do we do when there's a real war, or actually two wars going now actively. Your parents came here as immigrants.
Yes.
What do you think about the border? What do you think about, and actually this week, and we celebrate Immigration Day, Immigrants Day. So there is a give and take. No one, and I can tell you because I've talked to a lot of the people that have come in from many countries, not one wanted to come. They would all prefer to stay in their country if they have peace and work. That's it. That's all they're asking.
100%.
So tell me, as the son of immigrants, if you had your wish list, what would you do at this point?
So on the matter of immigration, right? America is known and proudly known as the beacon of hope for a lot of people in the world. And it's kind of a double-edged, it's a pro and it's a con at the same time, right? We're here and, we're known as the beacon of democracy, but at the same time, we have a large amount of people that want to come in. And if you look at America in a matter of just kind of how our population index works, Americans don't have a high reproduction rate. America risks a lower population as compared to a lot of other countries, a lot of more third world countries. And there's no doubt about how much of a key role immigrants play. They're there helping us essentially have a working population, decreased dependency ratio, and it plays a vital role in the United States. But there's also the national security standpoint. You mentioned 2 wars that are going on. We mentioned a world conflicted with issues and with threats that we haven't imagined to this day.
But the threats have been done by Americans here. If you see the bombings, if you see the large shootings, none of them have been done by immigrants. They have been done by white Americans that were born here.
Right.
So
right.
When you see the people that are coming into this country are the people that actually want to work, do you know how much money goes back to their countries every single month?
100%. And there's no doubt about it. I mean, again, I just have to highlight the pivotal role that immigration plays in the United States. But then again, we do really need to take a look at the national security aspect of it, because yes, a large majority of crimes in the United States are committed by Americans, and that makes sense, white Americans that were born here in the United States. But we still have reports of people on the most wanted list coming in through our southern border. And again, we need to talk about the fact that immigration really wasn't the talk of the town until Donald Trump was no longer president of the United States. Ever since then, I mean, from what I remember, the 2020 debates only featured maybe 2 questions on immigration, as compared to now, where it's one of the national emergencies that our country's facing. And on that topic,
immigration
we
has
need to.
Always been. Immigration has
it's always been, but never
ballot.
to this extent. Never to this extent when we're talking about millions, and I'm really talking a record number of immigrants coming into our country, which again, it's not a bad thing. But when we don't know who's coming into the country, that's when we're kind of encroaching on this whole intelligence issue.
Okay, so yeah, we can sit here and debate the whole immigration thing forever and ever and ever. But right. As you know, we don't have all the time in the world, so I wanted to move on.
Sure.
You are the chairman of the advocacy and legislative for the Youth Commission for Dade County.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And with your background as a son of Israelis, I know that you've been advocating a lot for the war. What are the challenges that you have been facing? Have you been facing any increase in anti-Semitism? Have you been facing anything? What are the challenges that you're now looking into?
I mean, it's not really the challenges that I'm facing, because I live in the city of Aventura, which is probably one of the, overwhelmingly Jewish cities in the United States. It's the problems that my constituents are facing. It's the problems that my friends that don't live in Aventura are facing. And what we see in this country is an over 1,000% increase in anti-Semitism since October 7th, when anti-Semitism before October 7th was already the leading hate crime that the country was facing. So we already have this growing plague of anti-Semitism that's going on in this country. And here comes October 7th. And whereas people would maybe stop and say, hey, maybe the Jews really are being targeted. It took 1,400 deaths in Israel to have people sit there and say, maybe Jews are the problem. And that's what we're facing in this country. Whereas we thought that October 7 would be a wake-up call for the world against anti-Semitism, it's only been pushing it.
We are being blamed for defending ourselves.
There we go.
I was asked this week that what made a difference from any other anti-Semitic attacks. And I have to say, I never thought that they hated us so much.
Right.
So are you afraid now that you're going into college with everything that's going on?
So I think this is the first time that I've ever taken into account anti-Semitism in my college application. I mean, I watched the hearings of multiple big college presidents testifying on what they're doing about anti-Semitism in their college. And I've never seen a greater example. I've watched a lot of congressional hearings because, you know, I'm into politics and I'm into stuff like that. I have never seen more non-answers in a single answer than those congressional hearings, right? It's, for me, concerning to the point where I've even considered not applying for George Washington because of the overwhelming amount of anti-Semitism that that college has hosted. We saw a 17%, I believe it was 17% decrease in applications or early applications going to Harvard University. And while these colleges sit there and say, hey, you know, we like to be a beacon of freedom of speech. We like to allow people to express
freedom
their
of
views.
Speech, remember what they said.
Right.
Based on the context.
Based on the context, and there is a red line. There is a red line.
But they did cross the red line.
A very, very long time ago.
Freedom of speech.
100%.
So it did make a difference when you are applying to college.
Yes, yes, and it made a difference for a lot of my friends and a lot of people in the Jewish community. We're really, really, that's why I feel like I somewhat feel optimistic in the sense that we, at least as Jews, whereas we were arguing just now about immigration, we're sitting here and we full-fledgedly agree and stand behind the Jewish people in the state of Israel. And for me, that's optimism, because whereas before October 7, a lot of the arguments that I would have with people is, you know, about the two-state solution. And these are people, Jewish people or Israeli people. And here we are now advocating for Israel's right to defend itself. And that's not something that we saw before October 7. There was always a very, very fine left and a fine right, even amongst Jews in the United States and in Israel. So the kind of sort of post 9/11 effect that October 7 had on the Jewish people, it's sad, but it's also something that united us. And that's a big, big aspect that we need to look at. I mean, we're a united people right now, and we can do a lot more when we're united, when we're tackling these universities and when we're tackling these institutions that don't support the Jewish people. We could do a lot more when we are united, as opposed to us sitting there and arguing over Israel and arguing over what we should do to tackle the Hamas question.
But the thing is that I don't think that we need to argue. I don't think, we simply do not have a choice.
Right.
That's it. We do not have a choice. It
100%.
is the end of the country, or we defend ourselves.
For sure. I mean, it's this whole idea where, I mean, if Israel loses a war, the Jewish people are essentially facing another genocide. And it's a reality that we haven't experienced, because since 1948, since the establishment of Israel, we have not lost the war. And I think it's sort of that kind of ignorance that the world's taking upon right now with this whole idea of Israel not losing war, that kind of tells everybody, hey, you know, maybe the Jewish people are more powerful than we thought they are. But here we are in 2023, and we're on the brink of potentially losing a war in Israel, not because of military, you know, inferiority, but because the world doesn't want to stand with the Jewish people.
But it never stands. So
never.
Moving towards another war, do you think that the United States should support Ukraine?
I think without a doubt, the United States should support Ukraine. And on that topic, I just kind of want to take a little look at the Republican Party, right? The Republican values, at least in looking at, for example, the big Republican figures like Ronald Reagan and bigger Republican figures like, I mean, who else have they used? I mean, Ronald Reagan promoted the idea of the Reagan Doctrine, which is the idea of us as a country tackling issues before they're even presented to us. And I'm actually reading a book by Henry Kissinger called Diplomacy that breaks down the whole geopolitical issue of Europe. And we really need to take a look at not what our country is facing now, but what our country could potentially face in 20 years. There is a raison d'etat, which means the interest of the state and the national security of the state. And a Russia that's emboldened and that's stronger because of a victory in Ukraine is not going to help the United States' national security posture in Europe. There's no way that an emboldened Russia will help us in Europe. And
no,
when
look
we're
at the
facing
consequences.
right, there are
Venezuela is
severe
now
consequences.
in the verge of invading Guyana.
Right. It
Backed
emboldens the
by
world.
Russia. And that is the part that we're not seeing, that it is not a consequence of not helping them right now. It's a consequence that will expand in many years to come.
There's a principle of balance of power that usually was applied to Europe, but that's now applied to the world. America plays a pivotal piece in that balance of power politics within geopolitics, whereas Britain served as a very, very strong balance of power measure in the 1800s. The United States now plays a large centerpiece of balance of power in the 21st century. I mean, when the United States is weak, it really does leave an imprint on the rest of the world. Other countries are emboldened when we have a nation as the United States that is not willing to step out of our doorstep and say, hey, you know, what are you guys doing? We, as an international community, it's a lot harder to kind of, you know, crusade all these good principles and the ideas of democracy when you don't have a country like the United States that's willing to support those ideas and support those principles.
Say, what do you do?
What do we do?
Hey,
we need to take a look.
We need to take a look. And what would you say for those out there that think that United States should not continue to support the war in Ukraine and now the war in Israel? What do you say to those people? That it's very far away, that we don't need to get involved?
I would say open your history books, because the most dangerous times in, I'd say, the human history is when our history books have been closed. When we decided that, you know what, we're going to make the same mistakes that we made 60 years ago, or the same mistakes that we made 80 years ago. How many times have we heard the story of how World War II could have been prevented if the Treaty of Versailles was just a little bit more potent, or, you know, had a little bit more of a measure to combat a potential more superior Germany? We're right now facing the idea where just kind of the Cold War has died out, right? We don't really think about the Cold War anymore. We don't think about right.
Today, Finland is facing attacks by Russia because they have now been accepted to NATO.
So we're kind of
the presidential Trump would love to take the United States away from NATO.
Right. With the death of the Cold War also came the death of the American concern over Russia. And now I would argue that we're in a worse position than we were in the Cold War, because whereas we had, you know, one nuke pointed at another one, we have 9 nuclear nations in the world. And a big player in the field right now is also China. So it's now not a Cold War against one state. It's a Cold War against Russia, China, and any other country that decides that they want to be radical or crazy with their nuclear weapons. So, I mean, we really do need to look at our history books. And I'd say this is a message that I'd give to the political candidates right now that are running for president. This is as a person that's 18 years old. You need to stop and understand history before you're going to run around and start advocating for isolationist ideas that have killed many people in the past. I mean, they talk about, what do they label all these people like Nikki Haley that are advocating for involvement in Ukraine? They call them warmongers. There is no better formula for war than forgetting about history.
And with that, I wish you all the best. I would vote for you. So please continue on the right path. And with everyone, thank you so much. I look forward to next week to another amazing topic of conversation. And above all, stay safe.
Thank you so much, Gladys.